The winter rain pelted against the windows of the Harrison mansion, but the storm outside couldn't match the tempest brewing within. Mia Harrison stood in the grand foyer, her newborn daughter Sophie clutched tightly to her chest, her world crumbling around her. The marble floors that had once felt like the foundation of her dreams now seemed as cold as the man standing before her. "I want you both out by morning," George Harrison declared, his voice as sharp as broken glass. He didn't meet her eyes, instead focusing on some distant point beyond her shoulder. The same shoulders that still bore the weight of pregnancy, that ached from countless nights of nursing their 6-week-old daughter. "George, please." Mia's voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "Sophie's barely 6 weeks old. I haven't even recovered from... I've made my decision." He cut her off, adjusting his expensive watch, a gift she'd given him on their 2nd anniversary. "Victoria and I have plans, and they don't include..." He gestured vaguely at Mia and the baby, as if they were furniture he'd grown tired of. "This. Victoria." The name burned in Mia's throat like acid, the woman who'd swept into their lives, like a hurricane in designer heels, promising George adventure and freedom from the burden of family life. Now she stood at the top of the curved staircase, a triumphant smile playing at the corners of her red lips. "The papers have already been drawn up," George continued, finally forcing himself to look at Mia. His green eyes, once warm with love, now held nothing but cold determination. "My lawyer will contact you about the settlement." Sophie stirred against Mia's chest, letting out a soft whimper. The sound seemed to make George flinch, but he quickly masked it with a scowl. 3 years of marriage, countless promises of forever, and now this, reduced to nothing more than a business transaction. "A settlement?" Mia's laugh was hollow. "You think money can make up for this? For abandoning your own daughter? I'm giving you both more than enough to start over." George's voice held an edge of defensiveness. "It's better this way. I'm not cut out for this kind of life." Victoria descended the stairs, each click of her heels against the marble like a countdown to Mia's exile. She placed a perfectly manicured hand on George's shoulder, and Mia watched as her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, leaned into the EI touch. "You should be grateful," Victoria's voice dripped with false sympathy. "George is being more than generous. Some men wouldn't give you anything at all." Mia felt something snap inside her. The fog of disbelief that had surrounded her since George's announcement suddenly cleared, replaced by a clarity so sharp it almost took her breath away. She straightened her spine, years of dignity and self-respect rising to the surface. "Keep your money, George," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "Keep your mansion, your fancy cars, and your new life with her. But remember this moment. Remember when you chose your ego over your own flesh and blood." She turned toward the grand staircase, Victoria stepping aside with a smirk as Mia climbed to what had been her bedroom. Sophie remained remarkably quiet, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The nursery they'd spent months preparing, the hand-painted clouds on the ceiling, the custom-made crib, the stuffed animals carefully arranged, now seemed like a cruel joke. With mechanical movements, Mia packed a bag with essential items. For Sophie, diapers, clothes, formula supplements for when her milk wasn't enough. She grabbed a few changes of clothes for herself, not bothering with the designer dresses George had bought her. Those belonged to a different life, a different Mia. As she zipped up the bag, her hand brushed against the frame on the nightstand, their wedding photo. The happy couple smiled back at her, frozen in a moment of pure joy. She remembered, that day, how George had promised to love and protect her forever. How naive she'd been to believe that forever meant more than 3 years and a baby he didn't want. When she returned to the foyer, George was gone. But Victoria remained, examining her reflection in one of the ornate mirrors. "Don't worry, dear," Victoria said, not bothering to look at Mia. "I'll take good care of him. He needs someone who understands his aspirations." Mia adjusted Sophie in her arms, making sure she was protected from the cold. What he needs, she replied, is something neither of us can give him. A conscience. The rain had intensified when Mia stepped outside, but she didn't hesitate. The weight of Sophie in her arms gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Behind her, the mansion's lights cast long shadows on the wet driveway, like fingers trying to pull her back into a life that no longer existed. She pulled out her phone, thankful she'd kept in touch with her college roommate Regina, who lived in the city. As she waited for Regina to answer, Mia looked down at Sophie's peaceful face. Her daughter's eyes were open, startlingly alert. For one so young, and in them Mia saw something that made her heart swell. Possibility. "We're going to be okay, sweet girl," she whispered, pressing a kiss to Sophie's forehead. "Mama's got you, and that's all that matters now." Regina answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. As Mia explained the situation, trying to keep her voice from breaking, she made a silent vow to her daughter. This wouldn't break them. George Harrison might have taken their home, their security, and their future as he'd imagined it, but he couldn't take their dignity. He couldn't take their strength. The taxi arrived 15 minutes later, its headlights cutting through the rain like hope-piercing darkness. As Mia settled into the back seat, Sophie still miraculously calm in her arms, she didn't look back at the mansion. That chapter of their lives was over, written in ink that could never be erased, but the story wasn't finished, not by a long shot. "Where to?" the driver asked, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. Mia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the future pressing down on her shoulders. But instead of crushing her, it strengthened her resolve. "Downtown," she said firmly. "Time to start over." The taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the Harrison mansion grew smaller and smaller, until it was nothing but a shadow in the rearview mirror, just like the man who'd chosen pride over love, and who would soon learn that some choices come with prices too heavy for even his fortune to bear. The autumn sun streamed through the windows of Mia's bakery, casting warm shadows across the freshly polished display cases. Sweet Beginnings had become more than just a business. It was a testament to her resilience, a dream built from the ashes of her old life. "Mama, can I have the blue sprinkles?" Sophie's voice rang out from behind the counter where she sat on her special stool, carefully decorating cookies with intense concentration. At 3 years old, she was the spitting image of her mother, from the determined set of her jaw to the slight furrow in her brow when she focused. "Just a few more, sweetie," Mia answered, sliding a fresh batch of croissants into the display case. "Remember what happened last time you went overboard with the sprinkles?" Sophie giggled, the sound like wind chimes in the morning air. "They looked like Cookie Monster sneezed on them." Mia's heart swelled as she watched her daughter. The past 3 years hadn't been easy, but moments like these made every struggle worthwhile. After that rainy night, Regina had taken them in, giving Mia the foundation she needed to rebuild. 6 months of working double shifts at a local cafe, studying business management online, and saving every penny had led to this, her own bakery in a bustling neighborhood of Boston. The bell above the door chimed and Regina walked in, bringing with her the crisp October breeze. "There's my favorite little baker," she called out, making Sophie beam with pride. "Aunt Regina, look what I made." Sophie held up a cookie covered in a mountain of blue sprinkles. Regina exchanged a knowing look with Mia before turning back to Sophie. "That's absolutely magnificent, sweetheart. You're getting better every day." As Regina settled in for her daily morning coffee, Mia noticed her friend's expression shift. "What is it?" she asked, recognizing the look Regina got when she had news she didn't want to share. Regina pulled out her phone, hesitating before showing Mia the screen. It was a news article from the business section. Harrison Industries CEO left penniless after fiancé's $1 million heist. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Mia's fingers gripped the edge of the counter as she read the headline again. Victoria had stolen from George and disappeared, taking millions with her. The article detailed how she'd manipulated company, accounts, forged signatures, and vanished without a trace. "Are you okay?" Regina asked softly, glancing at Sophie, who remained blissfully absorbed in her cookie decorating. Mia straightened her spine, pushing down the complicated emotions threatening to surface. I'm fine. It's not my problem anymore. But even as she said the words, memories flooded back. George's cold dismissal, Victoria's smug smile, the rain on her face as she walked away from everything she'd thought was permanent. Part of her wanted to feel satisfaction at George's downfall, but another part, one she wasn't proud of, ached at the thought of him being betrayed the same way. He'd betrayed her. The morning rush kept her busy, a steady stream of regulars coming in for their daily fix of fresh pastries and warm bread. Mia moved through it all with practiced efficiency, but her mind kept drifting to the article. It wasn't until the lunch lull that she allowed herself to really process the news. I can watch Sophie if you need a minute, Regina offered, seeing the tension in her friend's shoulders. Mia shook her head. I'm fine, really. It's just... She lowered her voice, making sure Sophie couldn't hear. Part of me wants to laugh at the irony. He left us for her, and she did exactly what I warned him she would do. Karma's a better baker than both of us, Regina said, trying to lighten the mood. The bell chimed again, and Mia looked up, freezing mid-laugh. George Harrison stood in the doorway, looking nothing like the powerful CEO who had dismissed her 3 years ago. His expensive suit was replaced by worn jeans and a simple button-down shirt. The arrogance that had once radiated from him was gone, replaced by something she'd never seen in him before: humility. Mia, he said softly, his voice carrying across the quiet bakery. Sophie looked up at the sound of the unfamiliar voice, and Mia's protective instincts kicked in immediately. Regina, could you take Sophie to the back to check on the chocolate chip cookies? Understanding flashed in Regina's eyes as she quickly ushered Sophie through the kitchen doors, though not before the little girl cast a curious glance at the stranger who had caused such a shift in the bakery's atmosphere. What are you doing here? Mia asked, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. George took a tentative step forward. I saw your bakery featured in Boston Magazine. He paused, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she remembered from their early days together. I needed to see you. Why? Because Victoria cleaned you out? The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she didn't regret them. He flinched as if she'd struck him. I deserve that. I deserve worse. He looked around the bakery, taking in the warm atmosphere she'd created. You've done well for yourself. No thanks to you, Mia replied, but some of the anger had drained from her voice. What do you want, George? To apologize, he said simply. Though I know it's not enough. I was blind, stupid, and cruel. What I did to you and Sophie. His voice cracked on their daughter's name. There's no excuse. Mia studied him, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the weight loss, the way his shoulders slumped under the weight of his choices. You're right, she said finally. There isn't. I don't expect forgiveness, George continued, his voice thick with emotion. But Sophie, she's my daughter. I've missed 3 years of her life because of my selfishness. I want to make it right if you'll let me. The kitchen doors swung open, and Sophie's laughter floated out, followed by the smell of fresh cookies. The sound made George close his eyes, pain etched across his features. She's happy, Mia said firmly. We're happy. I won't let you disrupt that. Please. George's voice was barely a whisper. I'm not asking to be part of your life again. I just want a chance to be a father to her, to prove that I can be better than the man I was. Mia felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. In her mind's eye, she saw Sophie asking about her father as she grew older, wondering why he wasn't around. Could she deny her daughter the chance to know her father even if he didn't deserve it? I'll think about it, she said finally. But if, and that's a big if, I allow you to be part of Sophie's life, it will be on my terms. And at the first sign that you might hurt her? I understand, George nodded quickly. Thank you, Mia. for even considering it. As he turned to leave, Mia called out, "George?" He paused, hand on the door. "I'm sorry about Victoria. Not because you didn't deserve it, but because betrayal hurts no matter who it comes from." He gave her a sad smile. "The difference is, I deserved what Victoria did to me. You and Sophie never deserved what I did to you." The bell chimed again as he left, and Mia stood rooted to the spot, watching his figure disappear down the street. Sophie's voice called from the kitchen, "Mama, the cookies are ready." Taking a deep breath, Mia squared her shoulders and headed back to the kitchen. Whatever George's reappearance meant for their future, she knew one thing for certain. This time, she was the one with the power to decide what happened next. The local park buzzed with weekend activity as Mia sat on a bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She'd chosen this location carefully for George's first meeting with Sophie, public, neutral, and with plenty of escape routes if things went wrong. Regina sat beside her, a steady presence in the storm of emotions Mia was trying to contain. "You don't have to do this," Regina reminded her, watching Sophie play on the nearby swing set. "No one would blame you if you changed your mind." Mia shook her head, eyes fixed on her daughter. Sophie deserves the chance to know her father, even if he doesn't deserve to know her. A familiar figure appeared at the park entrance, and Mia's breath caught in her throat. George stood there, scanning the playground until his eyes found them. He looked different from his visit to the bakery last week. More put together, though still a far cry from his CEO days. In his hands, he clutched a small gift bag. "No gifts," Mia called out as he approached. "Not yet," we agreed. George immediately set the bag down by a nearby trash can, raising his hands in surrender. "You're right. I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking." "That seems to be a pattern with you," Regina muttered, earning a sharp look from Mia. "Regina, could you bring Sophie over?" Mia asked, keeping her voice steady. "It's time." As Regina walked to the swing set, George shifted uncomfortably. How do you want to do this?" "We tell her the truth in terms she can understand," Mia replied. "She knows that some of her friends have daddies who don't live with them. We've talked about it before." George's face crumpled slightly at this reminder of all he'd missed, but he quickly composed himself as Regina approached with Sophie. The little girl was chattering happily about how high she'd managed to swing, her dark curls bouncing with each step. "Sophie, sweetheart," Mia called softly. "There's someone here who wants to meet you." Sophie looked up at George curiously, then back at her mother. She moved closer to Mia, suddenly shy, a rarity for her usually outgoing personality. "Hello, Sophie," George said, his voice thick with emotion. He crouched down to her eye level, maintaining a respectful distance. I'm your dad." Sophie's eyes widened and she grabbed onto Mia's hand. "My daddy?" Mia squeezed her daughter's hand gently. "Yes, baby. Remember how we talked about how some daddies live in different houses? Well, this is your daddy and he'd like to get to know you." Sophie studied George with an intensity that only a 3-year-old could muster. "Do you like cookies?" she asked finally, causing Regina to stifle a laugh. "I love cookies," George replied earnestly. "I heard you're very good at decorating them." "I put sprinkles on them," Sophie announced proudly. "But sometimes Mama says I use too many." "There's no such thing as too many sprinkles," George said, earning himself the first genuine smile from his daughter. The next hour passed in a blur of playground activities. Sophie, having decided that George was acceptable company, insisted on showing him her super special swing tricks. George pushed her on the swings, his face a mixture of joy and heartbreak as he experienced these simple moments he should have had years ago. Mia watched from the bench, her emotions warring inside her. Seeing Sophie laugh as George pushed her higher on the swing brought back memories of her own childhood dreams. A happy family, a devoted father for her children, a life built on love and trust. Dreams that had shattered that rainy night 3 years ago. "He's good with her," Regina observed quietly. "He's trying to be," Mia corrected. "Let's see if it lasts." As if hearing their conversation, George looked over at them, his eyes meeting Mia's. In that moment, she saw everything he wasn't saying, his regret, his gratitude, his determination. She looked away first. "Mama," Sophie called out, "watch me jump." "No jumping, Sophie," Mia and George said simultaneously, causing them both to freeze in surprise. Sophie, oblivious to the tension, pouted but continued swinging. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked hopefully. George looked at Mia, waiting for her decision. She checked her watch. They'd been at the park for almost an hour, longer than she'd initially planned. "Not today, sweetie," she said gently. "It's almost lunchtime and Aunt Regina's making your favorite mac and cheese." "Can Daddy come?" Sophie asked innocently, causing everyone to tense. George recovered first. "Not today, Princess, but maybe another time if your mom says it's okay." He glanced at Mia. "I should probably get going anyway." Sophie's face fell slightly, but she didn't protest. Instead, she surprised everyone by walking up to George and wrapping her arms around his legs in a quick hug. "Bye, Daddy." George stood frozen, overwhelmed by the simple gesture. His hands hovered uncertainly before gently patting Sophie's back. "Goodbye, Sophie. Thank you for letting me play with you today." As Regina led Sophie back to the swings for one last turn, George turned to Mia. "Thank you," he said quietly. She's amazing, Mia. You've done an incredible job with her." "I had to," Mia replied, her voice hard. "I didn't have a choice." George flinched but nodded. "I know. I'd like to do this again, if you'll allow it. Maybe once a week? I can work around your schedule." Mia studied him for a moment. "Saturdays. Same time, same place for now." She paused, then added, "If you disappoint her, George, if you make promises you don't keep—" "I won't," he interrupted, his voice firm. "I know I have to earn this. Earn her trust. Earn your trust in me with her. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mia. I'm just asking for a chance to be the father she deserves." "Actions speak louder than words," Mia replied. "Show up. Be consistent. Prove that you mean it." George nodded solemnly. "I will. And Mia?" He hesitated before continuing. "I know it doesn't change anything, but seeing you with her, seeing the life you've built, I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be." Before Mia could respond, Sophie came running back full of energy and stories about her final swing. George said his goodbyes, promising to see her next Saturday, and walked away from the playground. Mia watched him go, noticing how he stopped at the trash can, stared at the gift bag for a moment, then left it there. "Well," Regina said as they walked to her car, Sophie skipping ahead, "that went better than expected." Mia hummed in agreement, her mind already racing with the implications of this new chapter in their lives. As she helped Sophie into her car seat, her daughter asked, "Is Daddy coming back?" "Next Saturday," Mia answered carefully. "If you want him to." Sophie nodded thoughtfully, then asked, "Can we have mac and cheese now?" Mia smiled, grateful for her daughter's simple priorities. "Yes, baby, we can have mac and cheese now." As they drove away from the park, Mia caught a glimpse of a lone figure standing at the corner, watching them leave. George raised his hand in a small wave, and despite everything, Mia found herself hoping, for Sophie's sake, that he meant what he said about changing. But hope was a dangerous thing, and Mia had learned the hard way that it could cut deeper than any knife. This time she would protect her heart, and more importantly, Sophie's, no matter what George tried to prove. 4 consecutive Saturdays. George hadn't missed a single visit. Mia watched from her usual bench as he helped Sophie navigate the monkey bars, his hands hovering protectively beneath her. The October chill had given way to November's bite, and most of the playground regulars had abandoned the park for warmer activities. "Ready for your hot chocolate, sweetie?" Mia called out, checking her watch. They'd started bringing thermoses of hot chocolate to combat the cold, a routine Sophie now treasured. "Coming," Sophie called back, letting George help her down from the monkey bars. She ran to Mia, cheeks flushed from the cold and exercise. "Can Daddy have some too?" Mia hesitated, then nodded. She'd brought an extra cup, though she wasn't sure why. If he wants some. George approached cautiously, accepting the steaming cup with grateful hands. Thank you. He sat on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining the careful distance that had become their unspoken rule. Sophie wedged herself between them, oblivious to the tension as she sipped her hot chocolate. Daddy, do you have a house? The innocent question made both adults freeze. George recovered first, clearing his throat. I have a small apartment now, not too far from here. Is it bigger than our house? Sophie asked, chocolate mustache forming above her lip. No, Princess. It's much smaller. George's voice carried a weight that Sophie couldn't understand, but Mia heard it clearly. The mighty George Harrison, reduced to a modest apartment while his ex-fiancée lived lavishly on his stolen fortune. Detective Chen called yesterday, George said quietly, while Sophie was distracted by a squirrel darting across the playground. They found Victoria. Mia's hand tightened around her cup. And? She's in Singapore, beyond their jurisdiction. He laughed bitterly. Apparently, she's been planning this for years, before she even met me. What do you mean? George took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on Sophie as he spoke. She targeted me specifically. The detective found evidence that she'd done this before, under different names. He paused, glancing at Sophie to make sure she wasn't listening. She specialized in wealthy men going through midlife crises, men stupid enough to throw away everything that mattered for a fantasy. Mia absorbed this information, feeling an unexpected twist in her stomach. The idea that their family had been destroyed not just by George's weakness, but by a calculated scheme, made the wound feel fresh again. She had files on me. George continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Photos of us, you, me, and Sophie. She knew exactly when to approach me, what to say, how to... He trailed off, shame coloring his features. I was such a fool. Yes, you were, Mia agreed, but her voice lacked its usual edge. Did she take everything? George nodded. Most of it. The company's insurance covered some losses, but personally... He shrugged. I'm starting over. Got a job with a smaller firm. The apartment's rented. It's actually good for me, I think. Learning to live with less. Understanding what really matters. Daddy, look! Sophie interrupted, pointing at the squirrel now perched on a nearby trash can. He's eating a pizza crust. George smiled, genuine warmth replacing the sadness in his eyes. He must be a New York squirrel. They love pizza too. Sophie giggled, then suddenly sneezed. Mia immediately reached for the tissues in her bag, but George was faster, pulling a pack from his coat pocket. Their hands brushed as they both moved to help Sophie, causing them to pull back awkwardly. I've got it, Mia said softly, taking the tissues from him. After cleaning Sophie up, Mia announced it was time to go. The temperature was dropping, and she didn't want Sophie catching a cold. As they packed up their thermoses, George helped Sophie into her coat, zipping it up with careful attention. Next Saturday? Sophie asked hopefully, looking between her parents. Next Saturday, George confirmed, then glanced at Mia. Unless, maybe we could try something different? The Children's Museum has a new dinosaur exhibit. Sophie mentioned, she likes dinosaurs. Mia felt Sophie's excited grip on her hand. Please, Mama, please, can we see the dinosaurs with Daddy? Looking at her daughter's hopeful face, Mia weighed her options. The park was safe, controlled. The museum would mean more interaction, more time together, more opportunities for Sophie to get attached. But wasn't that already happening? I'll think about it, she said finally. I'll let you know through Regina. George nodded, understanding the dismissal. He knelt to hug Sophie goodbye, something that had become easier for both of them over the past month. Be good for your mom, Princess. I love you. The words slipped out naturally, causing both adults to tense. It was the first time he'd said it. Sophie, however, simply hugged him tighter. Love you too, Daddy. As they walked to the car, Sophie chattering about dinosaurs, Mia's mind raced. She thought about Victoria's calculated destruction of their family, About George's fall from a grace, about the small pack of tissues he'd kept ready in his pocket. Small things adding up to, what? Regina? She said into her phone later that night after Sophie was asleep. I need your opinion on something. The museum? Regina guessed. Sophie hasn't stopped talking about it. Am I crazy to even consider it? Regina was quiet for a moment. No. You're cautious. There's a difference. She paused. He's been consistent, Mia. 4 weeks without missing a beat. That's more than I expected from him. That's what scares me, Mia admitted. What if this is just another act? What if Sophie gets hurt? Then you'll be there to protect her like you always have been. Regina's voice softened. But maybe he really has changed. People can, you know. Mia looked at the family. Photo on her nightstand. Just her and Sophie at the bakery's opening, both covered in flour and laughing. It was her favorite picture, proof that happiness could be built from scratch. But lately she'd caught herself wondering if their family portrait had room to grow. The museum opens at 10, she said finally. Tell him to meet us there at 9:45. And Regina? Tell him. Tell him no gifts. Not yet. We're not there. After hanging up, Mia stood by Sophie's bedroom door, watching her daughter sleep. The moonlight cast shadows on her peaceful face, so innocent and trusting. George's words echoed in her mind. About Victoria's calculated scheme, about learning to live with less, about understanding what really matters. Please, she whispered to whatever force might be listening, please don't let him break her heart like he broke mine. But as she turned away from Sophie's room, a small voice in her head wondered if that prayer was too late for both of them. The Boston Children's Museum stood quiet in the early morning light, its colorful facade a stark contrast to the gray November sky. Mia arrived early, as she always did, Sophie practically bouncing with excitement beside her. They found George already waiting by the entrance, hands stuffed in his pockets to ward off the cold. You're early, Mia observed, checking her watch. 9:30. I couldn't sleep, George admitted, then smiled at Sophie. Ready to see some dinosaurs, princess? Sophie nodded enthusiastically, her curls bouncing beneath her purple beanie. Are they real dinosaurs? Well, George began, catching Mia's eye before continuing. They're models of real dinosaurs, but they're so big and detailed, it's like stepping back in time to when they really lived. As they approached the entrance, George pulled out 3 tickets. Mia started to protest, but he shook his head. Please, let me do this small thing. The museum was practically empty this early, their footsteps echoing in the vast lobby. Sophie's eyes grew wide at the massive T-Rex skeleton replica towering above them. She gripped both parents' hands instinctively, creating a moment of unexpected unity that made both adults tense. Look, Sophie, Mia said quickly, pointing to a display. They have a special area where you can be a paleontologist and dig for fossils. Sophie released their hands and rushed to the excavation pit, where child-sized brushes and tools waited. George followed, showing her how to carefully brush away sand to reveal the bones beneath. Mia watched as he patiently explained each discovery, matching Sophie's enthusiasm with genuine interest. The Triceratops was a herbivore, he explained, helping Sophie uncover a horn. That means it only ate plants. Like Uncle Luis? Sophie asked, referring to Regina's vegetarian brother. George laughed, the sound echoing off the museum walls. Exactly like Uncle Luis. Mia found herself smiling despite her reservations. George had clearly done his research, preparing for this visit with the same dedication he'd once given to business deals. As they moved through the exhibits, he had facts ready for every dinosaur, turning each display into an adventure. The interactive learning center, Sophie donned a lab coat that dragged on the floor. Look, Mama, I'm a scientist. Dr. Sophie, George announced solemnly, the world's foremost expert on dinosaurs and sprinkles. Sophie giggled, then grew serious. Daddy, did you have dinosaurs when you were little? The innocent question made both parents laugh, breaking some of the tension that had built up. No, princess. George replied. Dinosaurs lived millions of years ago. Even Mama and Daddy aren't that old. Though some days it feels like it, Mia murmured, earning a surprised look from George. They moved to the prehistoric ocean exhibit, where animated plesiosaurs swam across giant screens. Sophie pressed her face against the glass, mesmerized by the ancient sea creatures. George stood close by, ready to answer more questions, while Mia took a moment to check her phone. Everything okay? George asked, noticing her frown. Just the bakery. My assistant manager called in sick. Mia sighed, scrolling through messages. I might have to go in later. I could... George started, then stopped himself. Never mind. But Mia had heard the unspoken offer. The idea of leaving Sophie alone with George, even for a few hours, made her stomach twist. Yet hadn't he proven himself over the past month? Hadn't he shown up consistently, put Sophie's needs first, done everything she'd asked? Mama, look, Sophie called out, interrupting her thoughts. This one has a neck like a giraffe. They spent another hour exploring the exhibits, Sophie's energy never wavering. When they reached the museum cafe, she was still chattering about everything they'd seen. George bought them all lunch, simple sandwiches and juice boxes, and they found a quiet corner to eat. Can we come back? Sophie asked between bites of her peanut butter and jelly sandwich. George looked at Mia, waiting for her response. She wiped some jelly from Sophie's chin before answering. Maybe. We'll see. After lunch, Sophie's excitement finally began to wane. Her steps grew slower, her questions less frequent. Both parents recognized the signs of an impending nap. I think it's time to head home, Mia said gently, catching Sophie mid-yawn. But we haven't seen everything, Sophie protested weakly, even as she leaned against her mother's leg. The dinosaurs will still be here another day, George assured her. Sometimes it's good to save some things for next time. The word next hung in the air between them. Mia adjusted Sophie's beanie, buying time to think. The morning had gone well, better than she'd expected. George had been attentive, educational, and most importantly, genuine in his interactions with Sophie. As they walked to the exit, Sophie now barely awake in Mia's arms, George cleared his throat. About the bakery, I know I have no right to offer, but if you need help. George, Mia warned. Just listen, he said quickly. I know you don't. Trust me, you have every reason not to. But I've learned more in the past month about being a father than I did in all the parenting books I've been reading. Sophie, she's incredible, Mia. And that's because of you. I would never do anything to jeopardize the chance to be in her life. Mia studied him, noting the sincerity in his eyes, the way he stood straighter when talking about their daughter. The George she'd known 3 years ago would have made grand promises, tried to solve everything with money and influence. This George seemed different. I'll think about it, she said finally. No promises. The hope that flickered across his face made him look younger, more like the man she'd first fallen in love with. That's all I ask. In the parking lot, George helped secure a sleeping Sophie in her car seat, his movements careful not to wake her. Before closing the door, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Sweet dreams, princess. As Mia got into the driver's seat, George touched the window lightly. Thank you, he said. For today, for everything. She nodded, unable to form words around the complicated emotions in her throat. As she drove away, she watched in the rearview mirror as George stood in the parking lot, hands back in his pockets, watching them leave. At home, as she tucked Sophie into bed for her nap, her daughter stirred slightly. Mama? Yes, baby? I like when Daddy teaches me things, Sophie mumbled sleepily. He makes funny voices for the dinosaurs. Mia smoothed her daughter's curls, her heart aching with a familiar mix of love and fear. I know, sweetie, I know. Later, as she sat at her kitchen table with Regina's number pulled up on her phone, Mia thought about choices, about trust, about second chances. The bakery situation needed to be handled, and she had a decision to make. Sometimes the hardest part of moving forward wasn't forgetting the past, it was choosing to build a future despite it. She pressed call. Regina? Can you give me George's number? I need to talk to him about something. The words felt like jumping off a cliff. But maybe, just maybe, there would be solid ground beneath the fall. Mia's kitchen had never felt so tense. George sat at the table while she went through her detailed list of instructions for the third time. Sophie watched cartoons in the living room, unaware of the anxiety radiating from her mother. Emergency. Numbers are on the fridge, Mia repeated, checking her watch. Regina's is at the top. She can be here in 10 minutes if anything. Mia, George interrupted gently. I've got this. Go take care of the bakery. She pressed her lips together, fighting the urge to cancel everything. The Sunday morning rush would hit the bakery soon, and with both her assistant manager and another staff member out sick, she needed to be there. Still, leaving Sophie alone with George for the first time since everything made her chest tight with fear. Sophie needs lunch at noon, she continued. There's mac and cheese in the blue container, middle shelf of the fridge, George finished. And she likes the dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, but only if they're crispy. I remember. Mia blinked, surprised he'd retained such details from their conversations. Right, and her nap. 1 o'clock after lunch. She needs her purple blanket and 2 stories, but no more than that, or she'll try to delay bedtime. And yes, I know about the nightlight. A crash from the living room made them both jump. They rushed in to find Sophie standing by an overturned toy box, looking sheepish. I was trying to find Rex, she explained, referring to her favorite toy dinosaur. George moved efficiently, helping Sophie pick up the scattered toys while checking to make sure she hadn't hurt herself. The natural way he handled the situation made something shift in Mia's chest. He's probably under the couch, George said, getting down on his hands and knees to look. Aha! He emerged with the stuffed T-Rex, slightly dusty but intact. Sophie hugged the dinosaur close. Thank you, Daddy. Mia checked her watch again and sighed. I really need to go. Mama? Sophie looked up, suddenly realizing what was happening. You're leaving? Just for a little while, baby. Daddy's going to stay with you until I get back. Mia knelt down to her daughter's level. Is that okay? Sophie looked between her parents, then nodded. Can we show Daddy my dinosaur book? Of course you can, Mia smiled, kissing Sophie's forehead. She stood and faced George, her voice dropping. Call me if anything. I will, he promised. But everything will be fine. As Mia gathered her things, she watched George settle on the couch with Sophie, who was already pulling out her beloved dinosaur encyclopedia. The scene looked so natural it hurt. This was how it should have been from the beginning. I'll be back as soon as I can, she said from the doorway. Take your time, George replied, not looking up from the book Sophie was showing him. We've got this, right, Princess? Right, Sophie agreed enthusiastically. Bye, Mama. The drive to the bakery was a blur of worst-case scenarios playing through Mia's mind. She called Regina the moment she parked. They'll be fine, Regina assured her before she could even speak. George knows one wrong move means he loses everything. He won't risk it. But what if Mia? Regina cut her off firmly. Focus on the bakery. Let George focus on Sophie. It's time. The morning rush kept her busy enough to limit her worry to only checking her phone every 15 minutes instead of every 5. Around 11, a text from George appeared. Sophie, helping me make friendship bracelets. She says mine looks like a dinosaur ate it. Attached was a photo of their attempts. Sophie's surprisingly neat for a 3-year-old. George's indeed looking rather mangled. Mia found herself smiling despite her anxiety. Another text came at 12:30. Lunch successful. Only 3 nuggets. Rejected for insufficient crispiness. At 1:15. 2 stories read. Purple blanket secured. Someone says sweet dreams, Mama. This message included a photo of a sleeping Sophie, Rex tucked under her arm. Each update loosened the knot in Mia's chest slightly. By the time she finished handling the bakery crisis and headed home, She realized she hadn't checked her phone in over an hour. The house was quiet when she returned. She found George in the kitchen, carefully washing dishes while Sophie napped. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. He jumped slightly, not having heard her come in. "I wanted to." Sophie helped dry the plastic ones before her nap. "She's very thorough." Mia set her bag down, taking in the scene. The kitchen was spotless, toys had been picked up, and a fresh pot of coffee was brewing. It was all so domestic. "How was the bakery?" George asked, drying his hands. "Managed. Thankfully, the afternoon shift could come in early." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you. For today." George leaned against the counter, maintaining the careful distance they always kept. "I should be thanking you for trusting me with her." "I didn't have much choice," Mia pointed out. "You did," he corrected gently. "You could have called Regina or any of your friends. You chose to give me a chance." Before she could respond, tiny footsteps announced Sophie's arrival. She appeared in the doorway, hair mussed from sleep, Rex dragging behind her. "Mama!" She ran to Mia for a hug. "Daddy made friendship bracelets with me, and we had dinosaur nuggets, and he did all the voices in my story." "I heard," Mia smiled, smoothing Sophie's curls. "Did you have fun?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "Can Daddy stay for dinner?" The question hung in the air like a soap bubble, beautiful but fragile. George quickly spoke up. "Actually, Princess, I should probably get going, but maybe another time." He looked at Mia as he said this, and she found herself nodding slightly. "Maybe," she echoed. After goodbye hugs and promises to wear his friendship bracelet always, George headed for the door. He paused on the threshold, turning back to Mia. "I know today doesn't make up for anything," he said quietly, "but thank you for letting me try." Mia watched him walk to his car, remembering another day when he'd walked away from them. The contrast wasn't lost on her. Then he'd left them with nothing but pain. Today, he left having given Sophie a day full of joy and security. "Mama?" Sophie tugged at her hand. "Can we have pizza for dinner?" Mia closed the door, turning, back to their routine. But something had shifted, like a key turning in a long rusted lock. The walls she'd built to protect them didn't feel quite so necessary anymore. Later that night, as she tucked Sophie into bed, her daughter held up her wrist, showing off her friendship bracelet. "Daddy's wearing his too," she said sleepily, "even though it looks funny." Mia touched the colorful threads gently. "That's because he loves you, baby." "I know," Sophie yawned. "He told me lots of times today." As Mia turned out the light, leaving the nightlight's soft glow, she thought about love, how it could break you, heal you, and sometimes, if you were brave enough, give you a second chance at getting it right. On her kitchen counter, her phone lit up with one last text from George. "Thank you for today. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I'm here. No strings attached." Mia stared at the message for a long time before finally typing back, "Same. Time next Sunday?" His reply came instantly, "I'll be there." And for the first time in 3 years, the promise didn't feel empty. The late November wind rattled the bakery's windows as Mia finished the day's accounting. The past few weeks had settled into an unexpected rhythm. George watching Sophie on Sundays while she handled the bakery's busiest morning, regular Saturday outings that had expanded beyond the park, and a growing stack of dinosaur books in Sophie's room. The bell above the door chimed, bringing in a gust of cold air, and Regina, who looked uncharacteristically serious. "We need to talk," Regina said, sliding into a chair at Mia's favorite corner table. "That sounds ominous." Mia wiped her hands on her apron and sat down. "What's wrong?" Regina pulled out her tablet, hesitating before turning it toward Mia. "Victoria's back in Boston." The words hit Mia like a physical blow. On the screen was a society blog post showing Victoria at a charity gala the previous night. She looked exactly as Mia remembered, elegant, poised, and utterly dangerous. "Does George know?" Regina nodded. "Louise saw her first." She's apparently claiming the whole thing was a misunderstanding, that George gave her permission to move those funds. She's hired some hotshot lawyer and is threatening to sue for defamation. Mia's hands clenched around her coffee mug. She's trying to finish what she started, destroy whatever's left of his reputation. That's not all, Regina continued. She was asking questions at the gala. About you. About Sophie. The protective instinct that had driven Mia for 3 years roared to life. What kind of questions? About your custody arrangement, whether George has been spending time with Sophie. She seemed very interested in the fact that he's been watching her alone. Mia stood abruptly, reaching for her phone. Before she could dial, it rang. George's number flashing on the screen. I just heard, she answered without preamble. I'm so sorry. George's voice was tight with tension. I never thought she'd come back here. I've already called my lawyer and what does she want? There was a pause. Me, or rather, what's left of my company's shares. The investigation into the theft froze most of the assets she took. If she can prove she had authorization, she could get it all, Mia finished. But why now? Why show her hand? Because I'm vulnerable, George said quietly. I've been rebuilding my life, connecting with Sophie. Victoria knows that gives her leverage. She sent a message through her lawyer. She'll drop everything if I sign over my remaining shares. Mia sank back into her chair. And if you don't? She's threatening to file for an investigation into my fitness as a father. She has photos of me with Sophie, claims I'm using her to rehabilitate my image. Her lawyer suggested that my visitation rights should be reviewed, given my history of instability. The familiar panic of 3 years ago threatened to overwhelm Mia, but this time it was different. This time, she wasn't alone with a newborn, trying to piece her life back together. Come to the bakery, she said firmly. Now. 20 minutes later, George arrived, looking as shaken as she'd ever seen him. His usual composed appearance was disheveled, his hair wild from running his hands through it. I'll give her what she wants, he said before Mia could speak. The shares, everything. I won't risk losing Sophie again. Sit down, Mia ordered, sliding a cup of coffee toward him. Regina excused herself, squeezing Mia's shoulder as she left. I knew this was too good to be true, George said, staring into his coffee. Every time I think I'm making progress fixing what I broke, stop. Mia's voice was sharp. This isn't 3 years ago. You're not the same person and neither am I. But Sophie is loved, is protected, has a father who shows up every week, who learns her favorite dinosaurs, who makes terrible friendship bracelets because she asks him to. Mia leaned forward. Victoria can't take that away unless we let her. George looked up, surprise clear on his face. We? Yes, we. I may not have forgiven you completely, George, but I'm not letting that woman anywhere near our daughter. The word our hung between them, acknowledgement of a truth they'd been dancing around. Sophie wasn't just Mia's triumph or George's redemption. She was their shared responsibility, their connection that Victoria could never truly understand. I have documentation, George said, hope creeping into his voice. Everything she did, every transaction. I kept it all, even though the police said the case was cold. Good. And I have 3 years of records showing I never asked you for money, never tried to extort you even when I was struggling. Mia's voice caught slightly. Plus witnesses who can testify how you've changed, how you've been with Sophie. Regina? And Luis and half my regular customers who've seen you with her. Victoria thinks she can paint you as an unstable man trying to buy his way back into his daughter's life. We can show you're a father who's earning his place in it. George's hands trembled slightly as he set down his coffee. Why are you helping me? Mia was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. Because 3 years ago, you chose her over us. You chose fantasy over family. Now you're choosing Sophie over everything. Your pride, your money, your reputation. That matters. I don't deserve your help. This isn't about what you deserve. It's about what Sophie deserves. Mia stood, moving to the bakery's front window. The street outside was dark now, winter coming earlier each day. She deserves a father who fights for her, who puts her first. Are you that man now? Yes. The response was immediate, certain. Then prove it. Not by giving up, not by letting Victoria win again. Prove it by standing your ground. George joined her at the window, maintaining the careful distance they always kept. I'm scared, he admitted. Not of losing the money or the shares. I'm scared of losing these Sundays, these moments with her, with both of you. Mia turned to face him. Then let's make sure that doesn't happen. I'll call my lawyer tomorrow. We'll get ahead of this, file our own paperwork establishing your visitation rights officially, make it harder for her to interfere. You'd do that? Make it legal? It already is, in all the ways that matter. Mia managed a small smile. Sophie asked me yesterday if you were coming to her preschool Christmas show. She wants you there, so be there. George's eyes filled with tears. He quickly blinked away. What do we do about Victoria in the meantime? We document everything, every visit, every interaction. Build our case while she's busy playing society games. Mia's voice hardened. And we make it clear that if she comes after our family again, she'll regret it. Our family? George repeated softly, testing the words. For Sophie, Mia clarified quickly. For Sophie, he agreed, but something had shifted in the air between them. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a shared battle they needed to face together. As they discussed strategy late into the night, Mia realized that the woman who had walked away in the rain 3 years ago couldn't have imagined this moment, couldn't have pictured herself planning to fight alongside George, rather than against him. But then that woman hadn't known how much stronger she would become, hadn't understood that sometimes protecting your child meant accepting help from unexpected sources, even if that source was the man who had once broken your heart. The wind continued to rattle the windows, promising a storm to come, but this time they were ready for it. Snow fell softly outside the preschool's multipurpose room, but inside, the air was thick with tension. Mia sat in the front row beside Regina, watching Sophie practice her lines for the Christmas show. George was supposed to be here 15 minutes ago. He'll come, Regina whispered, noticing Mia check her phone for the 10th time. He's never been late before. Mia's stomach churned with familiar anxiety. Not once in 2 months. Sophie stood on stage in her reindeer costume, periodically glancing at the door. The teacher, Mrs. Chen, gave Mia a questioning look as she tried to organize 20 preschoolers into something resembling a choir formation. Just as Mia was about to step out and call him, the door opened. George rushed in, snow melting on his shoulders, his face pale and drawn. But it was the manila envelope clutched in his hand that made Mia's heart skip. I'm so sorry, he whispered, sliding into the seat next to her. Victoria's lawyer cornered me outside my office. Before Mia could respond, Sophie spotted him. Daddy, you came. Her delighted voice carried across the room, drawing every parent's attention. George managed a warm smile, waving at their daughter. Wouldn't miss it, princess. The rehearsal proceeded, with Sophie proudly delivering her 2 lines about Rudolph's nose. But Mia could feel the tension radiating from George, see the way his hands clenched around the envelope. Conference room, Mrs. Chen said quietly as she passed their seats. Take all the time you need. She'd been briefed about the situation, another ally in their growing support system. In the empty conference room, George spread the papers across the table. Legal documents, photographs, bank statements. Victoria had been busy. She's filing tomorrow, he said, voice hollow. Claims she has evidence that I'm using Sophie to manipulate public opinion, trying to rebuild my reputation through staged father-daughter outings. Mia picked up one of the photos. It showed George and Sophie at the museum, his hand protectively on her shoulder as they looked at an exhibit. Another captured them leaving the bakery, Sophie proudly wearing her baker's hat. Moments that should have been private, precious memories tainted by Victoria's surveillance. Look at the dates, Regina said, examining the documents. She's been watching you since the first park visit. She planned this from the start, Mia realized. She knew you'd try to reconnect with Sophie eventually. George slumped in his chair. I played right into her hands. Again. No. Mia's voice was firm. This isn't like last time. These photos, they show exactly what our lawyer said we needed. Consistent, positive interaction with Sophie. Regular visits, educational outings, proper attention to her needs. Mia's right, Regina added. Victoria just handed us evidence of George being a dedicated father. A small knock interrupted them. Mrs. Chen peeked in, looking apologetic. Sorry, but Sophie's asking for both of you. She wants to show you her antlers. George started to stand, but Mia caught his arm. Wait. She turned to Mrs. Chen. Could you give us a minute? We'll be right there. When they were alone again, Mia took a deep breath. Before we go back out there, I need to know, are you going to run? What? George looked startled. 3 years ago, when things got hard, you ran. You chose the easy path. Mia met his eyes steadily. Sophie adores you now. If you're going to break her heart like you broke mine, do it before. She gets even more attached. George's face crumpled. I deserve that. But Mia, I swear to you, I'm not going anywhere. Victoria can take every penny, every share, my entire reputation. I don't care. I won't lose Sophie again. Then prove it. Not just to me, but to everyone. Mia gathered the scattered papers into a neat pile. Remember when you said you wanted to deserve her love? This is how. By fighting for her. How can I fight? Victoria has unlimited resources, a team of lawyers, and we have the truth. Mia squared her shoulders. You're not alone this time, George. I meant what I said at the bakery. We face this together. A commotion from the multi-purpose room drew their attention. Through the conference room windows, they could see Victoria herself standing in the doorway, elegant in a designer coat, speaking to Mrs. Chen. George tensed, but Mia was already moving. Stay here, she ordered. Let me handle this. She strode into the room just as Victoria was trying to charm her way past Mrs. Chen. Sophie, still in her reindeer costume, had gone quiet on stage, staring at the stranger with uncertain eyes. You need to leave, Mia said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Parents turned to watch, sensing the drama unfolding. Victoria's smile was pure poison. Mia, darling, you look quaint. Still playing at being a baker? Mrs. Chen, Mia called, never taking her eyes off Victoria. Could you take the children to the music room? Sophie, baby, go with Mrs. Chen. But Mama, it's okay, sweetheart. Daddy and I will be right there. Once the children were safely out of earshot, Victoria's facade dropped. How domestic. You and George playing happy families. Does Sophie know her daddy abandoned her once? How long until he does it again? Get out. Mia's voice was ice. You have no right to be here. I have every right. I'm trying to protect that child from a man who... A man who what? Mia stepped closer. Who regrets his biggest mistake? Who shows up every week without fail? Who learns stupid dinosaur facts just to make his daughter smile? She laughed coldly. You don't care about protecting Sophie. You care about revenge. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You're a fool if you think he's changed. No, you're a fool if you think you can use my daughter as a weapon. Mia felt years of anger rising to the surface. You took advantage of a man's weakness once, congratulations, but Sophie, she's off limits. We'll let the courts decide that. Yes, we will. George's voice came from behind them. He moved to stand beside Mia, his presence steady. File. Whatever you want, Victoria. Take what's left of the money. But if you ever come near my daughter again, you'll regret it. Victoria looked between them, something ugly flashing in her eyes. How touching. The happy parents united at last. Tell me, Mia, has he told you everything about that night? About why he really chose me? Stop. George's voice shook. He didn't leave just because I offered him freedom, Victoria pressed. He left because... Mama? Daddy? Sophie stood in the doorway, her costume askew, tears in her eyes. Mrs. Chen appeared behind her, looking stricken. I'm so sorry. She slipped away. Mia moved instantly, scooping Sophie into her arms. George stepped between them and Victoria, his voice low and dangerous. "Leave, now, before I call the police." For a moment, Victoria stood her ground. Then, with a final venomous glare, she turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. "Who was that lady?" Sophie asked, her voice small. "Why was she being mean?" Mia held her daughter closer, feeling George's hand come to rest protectively on Sophie's back. In that moment, they weren't three broken people trying to find their way. They were a family united against a common threat. "Nobody important, Princess," George assured her. "Just someone who doesn't understand about love." Later, after they'd calmed Sophie and finished the rehearsal, Mia found George in the parking lot staring at his phone. "Victoria's lawyer sent the official filing," he said without looking up. "They're requesting an emergency hearing." Mia watched the snow fall, remembering another winter night when everything had fallen apart. But this time was different. This time they were stronger. "Let them file," she said firmly. "We'll be ready." George finally met her eyes. "There's something you should know." What Victoria was about to say. "Not now." Mia shook her head. "Right now we focus on Sophie, everything else can wait." As if summoned by her name, Sophie burst out of the school, running toward them with her costume antlers crooked. "Can we get hot chocolate? Please?" George looked at Mia, question in his eyes. She nodded slightly. "Hot chocolate sounds perfect. Baby, we could all use some warmth right now." The courthouse loomed before them, its granite steps slick with December ice. Mia clutched a thick folder of documents. Photos, receipts, testimonials from friends and customers, all carefully organized to prove George's transformation. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 9, and Victoria's latest threat still echoed in her mind. Time to reveal all the secrets. "Ready?" Regina asked, adjusting Sophie's coat. They'd arranged for Louise to watch her during the hearing, keeping her safely away from Victoria's toxic presence. "As ready as I'll ever be." Mia watched George climb the steps ahead of them, shoulders squared beneath his suit jacket. He looked more like his old self today, but somehow different. The expensive suit couldn't hide the humility he'd learned. Louise arrived right on time, greeting Sophie with their special handshake. "Who's ready for a super-secret dinosaur adventure?" Sophie brightened immediately. "Me. Can we get hot chocolate too?" "Of course, with extra marshmallows." Louise winked at Mia. "Don't worry, I'll keep her busy." George knelt to hug Sophie. "Goodbye. Be good for Uncle Louise, Princess. Mama and I have some grown-up things to take care of." "Will the mean lady be there?" Sophie asked, her voice small. Mia's heart clenched. Since the incident at the preschool, Sophie had been having nightmares. "She won't come anywhere near you, baby, I promise." After Sophie left with Louise, they made their way into the courthouse. Their lawyer, Patricia Monroe, waited by the elevators, her expression grave. "Victoria's team just filed additional evidence," she said without preamble. "They're claiming to have proof of ongoing conspiracy between you two." "What conspiracy?" Mia demanded. "They're suggesting this whole reconciliation was orchestrated, a plan to rehabilitate George's image and regain control of company shares." Patricia lowered her voice. "They have emails from 3 years ago." George went pale. "No." "George?" Mia turned to him. "What emails?" Before he could answer, Victoria appeared with her legal team. She wore victory like an expensive perfume, her smile sharp as she passed them. "Last chance," she murmured to George. "Sign over the shares and all those lovely emails stay private." The elevator ride to the 3rd floor was silent, tension crackling between them. Mia's mind raced. What emails? What else had happened 3 years ago? In the small conference room where they waited to be called, George finally spoke. "I need to tell you something. Before Victoria does." "Now?" Mia glanced at the clock. 20 minutes until the hearing. "Yes, now." George ran a hand through his hair. "The night The night I told you to leave. It wasn't just because of Victoria's manipulation. I was already looking for a way out. The words hit Mia like physical blows. What? I found out something that day, something that made me panic. He couldn't meet her eyes. The company was in trouble, major trouble. I'd made some risky investments trying to prove myself to the board. They were about to come crashing. Down. What does this have to do with us leaving? Everything. George's voice cracked. I knew I was about to lose it all, the company, the money, my reputation. And I convinced myself you'd leave anyway once we were broke, that you'd take Sophie and go. Mia felt the room spin. So you decided to strike first? Make us leave before we could choose to? Victoria knew. She'd figured it out, offered me a way to save the company through her overseas connections, said she'd help me rebuild if I gave her control of certain assets. He laughed bitterly. I was so desperate to save my precious reputation that I believed her. The emails? Messages between Victoria and me, planning how to protect the company's assets, including, he swallowed hard, including discussions about how to handle the divorce. She convinced me it would be cleaner, easier if I made you leave. If I made you hate me. Mia stood abruptly, needing space. The truth she'd carried for 3 years, that George had abandoned them for love of another woman, was being rewritten. Somehow this felt worse. You chose your pride, she whispered. Not even another woman. Just your damn pride. Yes. The simple admission hung in the air between them. Why tell me now? Because you deserve to know the whole truth. Because Sophie deserves a father who owns his mistakes completely. George finally looked up, and because I need you to understand, I'm not that man anymore. I'd rather lose everything else than risk losing Sophie again. The conference room door opened. Patricia stepped in. They're ready for us. The courtroom was smaller than Mia expected, more intimate somehow. Victoria sat with her lawyers emanating confidence. The judge, an older woman with steel-gray hair, studied them all carefully. As Victoria's lawyer began presenting their case, displaying the emails on a large screen, Mia felt something shift inside her. Each revelation, about the company's troubles, about George's desperate plans, should have destroyed her faith in him. Instead, she found herself remembering the past few months. George, patiently teaching Sophie to tie her shoes. George, showing up every Sunday without fail. George, choosing to live in a modest apartment rather than fight for his mansion. George standing beside her against Victoria, protecting their daughter. When it was their turn, Mia stood. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge nodded and Mia opened the folder she'd brought. These are pictures, receipts, and testimonials documenting every interaction between George Harrison and our daughter over the past 4 months. She began laying them out. Every visit, every phone call, every small moment of George becoming the father Sophie deserves. Objection, Victoria's lawyer called. These documents don't address the evidence we've presented. On the contrary, Mia continued steadily, they're exactly the point. Yes, George made terrible choices 3 years ago. Yes, he let pride and fear drive him to unforgivable actions. But these pictures show something Victoria's emails can't. They show change. She turned to face Victoria directly. You think you can use the past to destroy him? Go ahead. Show every email. Reveal every shameful decision. But you can't touch what matters most. The fact that George chose to be better. To do better. Not for his reputation, not for money, but for Sophie. George stood beside her, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. Your Honor, I'm not contesting anything in those emails. I was a coward who chose pride over family, but I'm here today asking for the chance to continue being the father my daughter deserves. Not because I deserve it, but because she deserves a father who will fight for her. The judge was quiet for a long moment, studying the photos spread before her. Finally, she spoke. Ms. Kingston, she addressed Victoria. Your evidence proves what Mr. Harrison was. These photos and testimonials show what he is. In matters of custody and visitation, I'm far more interested in the present than the past. She straightened her papers. Petition for emergency review of visitation rights is denied. The current arrangement may continue, with regular court check-ins for the next 6 months. Victoria's face twisted with fury, but Mia barely noticed. She was watching George as the truth settled over him. He wasn't losing Sophie. They'd won. Outside the courtroom, Regina hugged them both. Louise just texted. Sophie's giving a detailed lecture on pterodactyls to everyone at the coffee shop. Mia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. George touched her arm gently. "Thank you," he said softly, "for believing in change, even when I didn't deserve it." Mia looked at him, really looked at him, the man who had broken her heart 3 years ago, the man who had chosen pride over family, the man who had learned humility, who showed up every week, who fought to be worthy of their daughter's love. "Sophie deserves to know both sides of her story," she said finally. "The father who left, and the father who came back, who stayed, who fought." They walked down the courthouse steps together, into the bright December morning. The truth they carried was still heavy, but somehow easier to bear when shared, when understood, when forgiven, not for the sake of the past, but for the future they were building. Spring painted Boston in shades of renewal, cherry blossoms dotting the public garden, fresh herbs sprouting in window boxes, and new beginnings blooming in unexpected places. Mia stood in her bakery's kitchen, watching Sophie arrange cookies on a display plate for a special occasion. "Do you think Daddy will like them?" Sophie asked, carefully positioning a dinosaur-shaped cookie with green frosting. "He'll love them," Mia assured her, "especially since you made them yourself." Today marked exactly 6 months since the courthouse victory over Victoria. 6 months of peaceful Sundays, consistent visits, and a family finding its new normal. The celebration had been Sophie's idea, a surprise party for George at the bakery. Regina burst through the kitchen doors, arms full of balloons. "Luis is keeping George distracted at the park, but they'll be here in 20 minutes. How's my favorite baker doing?" "Almost done," Sophie announced proudly, placing the last cookie. "Look, I made the T-Rex extra scary." "Terrifying," Regina agreed, solemnly. "Your dad won't know what hit him." As they finished the preparations, Mia's mind drifted to the past 6 months. George had kept his word, showing up for every moment, big and small. He'd attended parent-teacher conferences, helped with preschool projects, and even learned to make a decent friendship bracelet. More importantly, he'd proven that his change was genuine, his love for Sophie unchanging even after Victoria's attempts to destroy him. Victoria had disappeared back to Singapore after the hearing, her revenge plot thwarted. The last they'd heard, she'd found a new wealthy target, leaving Boston and their lives for good. "They're coming," Sophie squealed, spotting Luis's car through the window. Everyone took their positions. Regina, her brother Luis, several regular customers who'd watched this family story unfold, and even Mrs. Chen from the preschool. Sophie bounced with excitement beside the cookie display, while Mia adjusted the "Congratulations on 6 months" banner one last time. The bell above the door chimed and George walked in, stopping short at the sight before him. "What's all this?" "Surprise!" Sophie launched herself into his arms. "We made you a party. Look, I made dinosaur cookies all by myself." George's eyes met Mia's over their daughter's head, emotion clear in his gaze. "You did this?" "It was Sophie's idea," Mia said softly. She wanted to celebrate. The party flowed naturally, with Sophie playing proud host as she showed off her baking skills. George praised each cookie as if it were a masterpiece, his joy completely genuine. Watching them together, Mia felt the familiar ache in her chest, not of pain anymore, but of something deeper, more complex. "Penny for your thoughts?" Regina appeared beside her, offering a cup of coffee. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Mia replied. "A year ago, I couldn't imagine any of this. Life has a way of surprising us." Regina nodded toward George, who was listening intently as Sophie explained the difference between herbivore and carnivore cookies. He's not the same man who left you in the rain. No, he's not. Mia smiled slightly. And I'm not the same woman he left. As the party wound down, Sophie grew sleepy, curling up in her favorite corner with Rex the dinosaur. George helped clean up, falling into the easy rhythm they'd developed over months of shared parenting. Thank you, he said quietly as they wrapped leftover cookies. Not just for today, but for everything. For giving me the chance to be her father again. You earned it, Mia replied honestly. Every day, every visit, every moment you chose. Her first. George was quiet for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket. I have something for you. Well, for both of you. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a legal document. George signing over his remaining company shares into a trust for Sophie's future. I don't want anything from the old life hanging over us, he explained. This way, when she's older, she'll have security. But it can't be used as leverage against any of us ever again. Mia studied the document, understanding the magnitude of what he was giving up. George, I meant what I said in court, he continued. I choose her. I choose being her father over everything else. The man I was cared about power, about image, about what other people thought. The man I am now. I just want to be worthy of her love, of the faith you've shown in me. Regina appeared before Mia could respond. Sophie's out cold. Want me to take her up to your apartment? The bakery's upstairs apartment had become their sanctuary over the years, a home built from determination and dream. Mia shook her head. I've got her. George, would you? He nodded, gently lifting their sleeping daughter. They climbed the familiar stairs, Sophie's warm weight shared between them, and tucked her into bed. Rex found his usual spot in her arms, and her dinosaur nightlight cast soft shadows on the walls. Back downstairs, the bakery was empty, their friends having quietly slipped away. The setting sun painted the display cases in amber light, and the banner fluttered softly in the breeze from the open window. I should go, George said, but hesitated by the door. Mia, I know we can never go back. I know what I broke can't be fixed completely. But I want you to know, watching you with Sophie, seeing the amazing woman and mother you've become, I'm so proud of who you are, who you've always been. Mia felt tears prick at her eyes. The night you told us to leave, I thought my world was ending. But it wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning of finding out who I really was, what I was capable of. You're capable of anything, George said softly. You proved that, and you taught me what real strength looks like. They stood in comfortable silence, the space between them filled with understanding. They weren't the young couple who had fallen in love, nor the broken people who had parted in rain and pain. They were something else now. Parents united in love for their daughter, adults who had learned from their mistakes, humans who had found forgiveness not in forgetting the past, but in building a better future. Same time next Sunday, Mia asked, their familiar farewell taking on new meaning. Wouldn't miss it. George smiled, then added quietly, Thank you for letting me come home. As the door closed behind him, Mia looked around her bakery, at Sophie's cookies displayed proudly, at the banner celebrating 6 months of healing, at the life she'd built from the ashes of her old dreams. Outside, spring continued its work of renewal, painting the world in colors of hope. Upstairs, Sophie slept peacefully, loved completely by both her parents. Not in the way they had originally planned, perhaps, but in a way that was harder won and more precious for its imperfection. Their family had been broken, but in healing they had all become stronger at the broken places. Mia turned off the lights and headed upstairs to her daughter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments to navigate, new opportunities to choose love over pride. But tonight, in the quiet of their home above Sweet Beginnings, she knew with certainty that they would face it all together, not as the family they once were, but as the family they had chosen to become. And sometimes she was learning that was an even better story to tell. If you were in Mia's shoes, would you give a second chance to someone who destroyed your family out of pride? How far does sincere repentance deserve forgiveness? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.